vibe.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Rendes, also known as Ricky Rendes, and a great episode for you today. Today, we have returning guest, somebody who I've had many conversations with, Monica Perez. She's a researcher, podcaster, thinker, philosopher, historian, and much more. And overall, just a fascinating person to bounce ideas off and get her perspective on what's going on in the world. So today, that's what we do. We talk about what's going on in the world. We talk about her perspective, and she always has a unique one. So I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. But of course, I have to remind you, this is a value for value show. If you get any value out of the discussions I bring to you, and I'm sure you will, and I'm sure you do, because recently we had Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell from the telepathy tapes that people are really giving me tons of super positive feedback on. Also, my amazing 2.5-hour conversation with David Icke that I released recently. People really enjoyed. So if you're enjoying the Ripple Effect Podcast, try to help out. You can rate, review, subscribe to the show on all the platforms I'm on. I'm on a bunch of them: Substack, BitChute, Minds, Rockfin, Rumble, and recently reinstated back onto YouTube. So now you can watch the Ripple Effect Podcast on YouTube. And if you watch the show, share the show, thumbs up, comment, do all those little things to kind of help get the algorithm's attention. It does help bring new eyes to the Ripple Effect Podcast. Any type of engagement can help with the algorithm, so please consider doing that. It doesn't take a lot of time. Like I said, rate, review, thumbs up, subscribe, watch, share, all that stuff. And then, of course, if you are in a good financial situation, please consider helping the show financially if you can. Of course, I know a lot of people can't, and that's okay. But if you are in a good financial situation and you do listen to the Ripple Effect Podcast on occasion and enjoy what you listen to, please consider helping financially. You can support us monthly on Patreon, and that's one of the best ways of helping the Ripple Effect Podcast because it's guaranteed funds monthly. You can also send a one-time donation on Venmo or PayPal. You can send crypto. You can check out our merch store, which has tons of hoodies, t-shirts, tank tops, mugs, and much more. And we have tons of cool logos and designs. Just go to the rippleeffectpodcast.com and find all the ways of supporting the Ripple Effect Podcast, including finding our merch store, or you can go to the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com to go directly to the merch store. And wherever you're watching or listening to the Ripple Effect Podcast, chances are these links will also be in the show description. I also have a couple of sponsors, one being Content Safe. Content Safe links all my video channels together. So I upload to one platform, then magically that video will appear on all the video platforms I'm on. So it's a quick and easy way to get all my videos everywhere. Matt from Content Safe also runs my website. So if you're a content creator, reach out to Content Safe. Let them know you're a listener of the Ripple Effect Podcast, and they'll definitely take care of you. And if you are a content creator, also check out Opus Clips and use the link in the show description or on my website. And it's an AI software program that helps you make 30, 40 viral videos to post on your video channels or your Instagram or TikTok. And it's fast, it's easy, it rates these videos based on how viral they are or how trending the topics are. And then there's tons of other features like you can create AI thumbnails, you can add music, you can add AI B-roll, and much more. So please, if you're interested in something like this, use the links in the show description or on my website for Opus Clips to help the Ripple Effect Podcast and help yourself start making viral videos now. Thanks, guys. Enjoy this amazing conversation with Monica Perez, and I'll talk to you guys on the next one. Peace.
I kind of expected this to happen because that's just what I thought Trump was being put in place to do. And I feel like he's always had a strong relationship with Israel. He's always kind of you see those ridiculous pictures of him like pushing in Netanyahu's chair and everything. But uh, his son-in-law was close to Netanyahu growing up. Like there's the even like Kushner's father went to jail for how he got money to put in Hillary Clinton's campaign. So like there's a lot of backroom dealing there. And they've been trying to hit Iran for decades upon decades. And Netanyahu started saying they would have nukes. I mean, 30 years ago, he was saying that. Michelle Bachmann in 2012 during the presidential campaign said Iran's going to have nuclear weapons in 12 months. So obviously, they've been using that as an excuse. But why it's happening now, I think there's two reasons. One is the way Israel has just been pedal to the metal on Gaza for years and nobody's stopping them. And then Syria, which has been like simmering away for 14 years. And so it's like 50,000 Gazans have been killed. I think 400,000 is a conservative effort of how many Syrians have been killed since this Arab Spring thing in 2011. And they could never get rid of Assad. And now all of a sudden they did get rid. So there's a lot of momentum, a lot of confidence. Russia's obviously on its heels. I imagine that getting them mired in Ukraine was a big part of the Anglo-American Israeli empire's plan for the Middle East. But I don't think, I have to say, you're saying like, the backroom dealings thing is getting covered later. I've thought for a while that Iran elements of their government, first of all, they were definitely installed by the West, in my opinion. We got rid of it's documented that the Shah was undermined by the CIA. And then I think we put in that regime. We were on both sides of the Iran-Iraq thing, or just on Iraq's side, and then took Iraq out. Iran-Contra. Yeah, so I guess we were on both sides. Adnan Khashoggi, who gave Trump a steal on his yacht, was an arms dealer for that, if I recall correctly. So there's definitely a lot of backroom stuff. And I think Iran, for them to do this to Iran and actually expect regime change, which is what they're talking about, which I think would be they're trying to get the Shah's son in power, Reza Pahlavi, whatever. Iran's a 92 million person country, and Syria was only 25 million, and it took 14 years of softening up. So if they really expect to get any kind of regime change in Iran or get anything out of this is either the beginning of a really, really long thing, or they've been taking out any kind of Iranian loyalists from the top echelons, and whoever's left will probably deal. So it would be an inside job. It's controlled opposite. I don't know what, but the way they're doing it makes me think, I mean, to get rid of a 92 million person country, if Syria took 14 years, I think they probably expect cooperation from the government for regime change, is my guess.
Yeah, I feel like October 7th, a lot of us compared it to September 11th,
right
when it happened.
Same perp.
I thought most of what they were going to use it for was going to be what was going on in Gaza. It was going to be that conflict. But now it seems like it has become a justification for just about Israel to do anything it wants. And it's mind-boggling that people don't see that correlation of, reflecting on Iraq and saying like, hey, there was no link between Iraq and September 11th. There's no link with Afghanistan and September 11th. Not really. There's a lot of links to Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of links to Pakistan and the ISI and the money being funneling through there. So there's a lot of other interesting things.
I'd read a long time ago the kind of anatomy of a psyop, and it said that you start out slow, you do one thing, and if it works, you can expand it, you can add to the story, you can add to the backstory. And I discovered it when I was digging into Edward Snowden. Like, they kept adding pieces to a story that weren't there before. They made a movie about something with pictures from something that didn't happen, like ridiculous stuff like that. But I feel like once they got away with, so October 7th it's just not believable that hang gliders got through the Iron Dome. It's just not believable. And so, once that they got, and it's actually more empowering that it's totally unbelievable and they're still getting away with it. That means that it's kind of, I don't know if it's like COVID or what, but like where, wow, everybody knows this is wrong and nobody can stop it. And I think once they had that kind of wind under their sails, they just thought, well, nobody's going to stop us. Who would stop them? Right. It really, 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 really pivots on Russia, that they could expand it because Russia really couldn't help Assad keep Syria.
There's a lot of people like, the No Agenda guys, PBD, the Patrick Bet David podcast. A lot of people have been analyzing the way Trump has been acting of late. And again, like, the PBD guys, like, obviously they're very pro-Trump. So maybe they could be searching for something that's not really there and looking for evidence that maybe he doesn't want to do this, and it's maybe even against his will. But when it's No Agenda and other people that aren't really, pro-Trump guys, and they're saying the same thing, because I seem to like pick up on some things. It looked like I was picking up on some social cues on like, this is not like him. One, it's not like him to have short press conferences and speeches. He didn't seem like himself. He didn't seem like very confident like he typically does. Do you think that there is something to that Elon Musk tweet that Jeffrey Epstein files will never be released because Trump's in them, and because Mossad seems to be like the CIA on steroids in regards to their blackmailing? They're just so ahead of the game. It seems like they have their hands in everything. I mean, we did that podcast together on the Danny Castellero story. Like, there's links to Mossad in that. There's links to Mossad with the Jeffrey Epstein story. There's links to Mossad with Jack Rubenstein and the JFK assassination. There's links to Mossad with 9/11. It seems like they have their tentacles in everything. So do you think it's possible that maybe he could be forced into this by some blackmail or, maybe fear of his life, something like that?
Maybe, but I don't think so for a couple of reasons. First of all, I have like a basic tenet: foreseeable consequences cannot be unintended consequences. So before the election, I was saying it's pretty clear this guy is going to go into Iran. He's going to be behind Israel. This war is going to expand. I mean, I could go find it, especially after the assassination attempt, which I thought was fake. And they said it was going to be Iran. I thought, well, this will give him, an excuse. So if it's foreseeable, which it was, it can't be unintended. It was definitely planned. If he doesn't see it because he's not informed or he relies on people to inform him, that is possible. Do I think he could be blackmailed? My instincts tell me no, and I'll tell you why. It's actually because I don't think he's as bad a guy as people say. He's not a drinker. He's got plenty of women. He had them young. He had them beautiful. He didn't need teenagers. He didn't need Epstein. He's no Dershowitz. Like, he could do it himself. And he's cheap. He's a germaphobe. So people underestimate that. Like, he does not like germs. And he doesn't like to spend money. I can tell you a couple of examples. When I lived in Manhattan many, many years ago, I lived on 57th Street and he lived in the Trump whatever at Columbus Circle. And I was in a store and he was in the store with a bunch of bodyguards and he was just pointing at things. He would not touch anything. At the time, I just thought he was a douche. But now I think maybe he's a germaphobe. Same thing with those prostitutes peeing on a bed. There's no fucking way he's paying for anything. And he's definitely not involving himself with somebody else's urine, doesn't care about that stuff. Didn't happen. I just don't believe it for a second. I think they've got nothing on him because he doesn't drink. So nothing like that, nothing out of control sex stuff. Maybe business dealings. I don't know. I mean, this Qatar plane thing was weird. And I would just say, I do think that I've always thought, his wealth was overestimated. And I read a biography of his called Trump Nation long time ago, at least 15 years ago. And the guy said he's not that rich. And Trump sued him for libel, but then dropped the suit and I think it's because he really wasn't that rich. And then things have happened from Truth Social. I think he got that post office that he turned into a hotel in DC, I think should have been worth a few $100 million. And I think he was just setting his family up, almost like mobsters set the family up to go legit. Like I think it's a deal. It was a business deal for him. And he's an actor. He was trained by Jeff Zucker to do The Apprentice for many years. And they set him up as being, America's boss. It just seems very like staged to me. And so it doesn't matter to me what he thinks or knows or feels, because in my opinion, he's a paid actor. I know it's not, people don't like to hear it, but I can predict his behavior better than other people. So maybe my theory is more valid.
Before he even wasn't even running for president, Iran was already on the list of countries we're going to get involved in. I mean, people were talking about that after Iraq. Famous General Wesley
Clark.
Clark, when he talked about, and Iran was on that list. I definitely think the plan is bigger than Trump.
Yeah.
In regards to his potential of being blackmailed, I mean, Mossad's really good. If they know he doesn't do anything, then it wouldn't, I don't think it would be hard for them to spike something, put something in his drink.
I think it's bribery. See, there's two ways to control them, the carrot and the stick. And whatever, I just think it's the carrot. I think that it's been the deal from the beginning. And if he changes his mind, yes, you just kill him. I think he knows that. So that's the deal. But they continue to enrich him. So I feel like he's going along with it. He may have convinced himself that he's doing this for the greater good. Like he might actually believe his bullshit.
Some people do believe that Israel's interest is America's interest. If you're around people who are persuasive enough, maybe you don't have a strong opinion on it, and somebody gets to you first and shows you only one side of the argument, they can slowly start molding your worldview. I mean, RFK Jr. has a very similar type of attitude towards Israel in regards to, like, he seems very logical and critical thinking in regards to so many different topics, and all of a sudden all logic and all critical thinking goes out the window when you bring up Israel. And it just, to me, when somebody acts like that, and I've had personal conversations with people where for some reason there's certain topics that just you can't get through to them with. And
well, it's probably religious. I mean, and Protestants will be religious about it, and Americans will, it's quasi-religious. I don't like it. I get a little defensive when people are rude about Catholicism, because the tenets of Catholicism are sound. I will not defend the Vatican, the Pope, it's really a bummer, but I don't get emotional about that. But I think most people conflate the figurehead with the institution, with the principles, and they can do that in the US. Like the military guys were always behind Trump from 2012 on, or 2015, or whenever people started talking about him and he started running. And I would say he never talks about the Bill of Rights. And they didn't care. They thought he loves this. That's what my mother used to say. He loves this country. I don't care. But the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, this country, our foundational principles, the Republican Party, these are all totally different things. And if my country, right or wrong kind of stuff, we've been softened up to think that way. And Republicans especially. So you can see what a cult of personality it is when someone called me, it was actually quite humorous, I thought. Someone called me a lying bitch on Twitter because I objected to Trump sending in the Marines to LA on the grounds that posse comitatus didn't violate it directly. It was borderline, and it would be a stepping stone for future use of the military, specifically to suppress objections to war. I can rattle off like 10 things that are happening right now with regards to immigration that I think are being set up to keep people from having honest conversations about this war. And how you have Republicans defending a potential violation, wanting to skirt the line for posse comitatus, like that's just that's just personality stuff, and people don't separate out what they think are their interests, their loves, and if they think that there's a Judeo-Christian, mandate to defend the land of Israel for the people who are there now, which I don't even, people even dispute whether like it's the Khazarians or what, I don't even know, but like Ashkenazi and like, I don't know. It's fucking 2,000-year-old or 3,000-year-old issue, or, 1,500 years old. I mean, I know people have title to land and don't have right to access it. So, I mean, that's how we do it. We're not giving it back to the Indians, but whatever.
No, you're right. That whole argument about whose land it is, it's all a matter of like how far do you want to go, and you can look at it from many different perspectives. I mean, I was born in Portugal. The land was Spain at one time. The Moors were there at one time. I mean, there was like, we can go back and say, hey, should we give it back to the Spanish? Should we give it back to the Moors? Should we get? It's like, it is complex. So this idea of like picking one moment in history and saying this is truly our land because of this one event in history, and this dictates who gets this land forever. It is a little silly, because I think it is more complex than that. But the thing is, to me, it's you get these Nick Fuentes, this Jake Shields, who I give him a lot of credit because he went from like MMA fighter to all of a sudden taking serious heat and being very opinionated, and not being afraid of sharing his thoughts, agree or disagree with them. But there is, I think, a lot of what they are afraid of. Some of it's justified in regards to like, there is a concern about the fact that Israel, all those events we talked about, that Israel could potentially have a hand in them and have some type of influence. They could be involved to some extent, even if it's just a little bit. And it's like the Saudi Arabians, like the 28 pages that got redacted with 9/11. Everybody's like, yeah, maybe they were involved. Let's just move on. And I feel like we have the same type of attitude towards Israel, where like, if they do anything wrong or they're linked to anything negative, we just kind of look past and say, well, they're our allies. It's such a brainwashing. It's like talking to somebody who you can't convince them that vaccines can cause some type of injury, and they're just been so brainwashed to repeat the official line that no, there's no link between autism and vaccines. Oh, there's no, vaccines are safe and effective. All that, it's impossible to get through to them. And the thing about Mossad is that I do feel like, because of just all the research I've done on them, like I do feel like if the CIA can do all the things they've done with regime change and all this stuff, like Mossad has at least equal amount of influence and ability to also persuade the public opinion. And
yeah, they probably own the CIA also. Like, I don't even think it's separated, but there's an elitism there that it has to be an elitism there that I noticed it when I was on the radio. People talked about the callers and stuff. They wanted to defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But when you talked about other people having rights, they would say, well, he's not American, so you can just have him like detained forever. And my question to them, 9 out of 10, was always, do our rights come from God or come from the Constitution? I mean, do you have the right to not having your stuff searched and seized? Or is that, do you have the right not to say something that's going to be used against you? I understand those are civil rights defined by the Constitution. That's fine. But where do they come from? If you think that they came from just the Constitution, then they're totally mutable. They're not inalienable. And so you've got people talking out of both sides of their mouths about that. But at the bottom of it is, and you could hear Lindsey Graham saying, and they've been saying this the entire time, they always say this, the Arabs, Muslims, whatever, are irrational. You can't trust them. They're lunatics. They want to die. They want to die while killing you. And if you take out the rationality, then you can't argue against why would they, why would they do this? Why would Iran attack the United States? First of all, They have the right to self-defense. So nobody shouldn't have a right to nukes. If anyone has nukes, everyone should be entitled to have nukes. Like, that's just the way it is. We're the only ones who ever used them. We're the only ones who've proven to be completely irresponsible when it comes to nuclear weapons, if they really exist. I don't even know. But they, if you say they're absolutely crazy, irrational, whatever, then you can't predict their behavior. You can't apply the principles and they were using that the entire war on terror. Well, our founders didn't know there could be people who were scary out there, and they wrote these laws. It's like, yes, they had, like, literally in the Constitution, letters of marque and reprisal for pirates. These are pirates, privateers. It's either a country or they're pirates, and this is a country. And you see all over the newspaper, it has like, this is where the nearest nuclear bomb shelter is. Iran does not have nuclear weapons. Does not have nuclear weapons. Nobody is even claiming that it has nuclear weapons, but they're trying to scare the shit out of you. And by the way, one of the places that they bombed was completely neutralized by Obama's deal that Trump pulled out of. So this thing, I think it's a setup. And I guess it's just ultimately for the bigger Middle East project. And I guess it will, make Israel the regional hegemon, but you got to think underneath it all, it's really the Anglo-American empire that wants to create like a Middle Eastern EU, like an MEU. I mean, why else? And I don't know. I mean, I think they're ready to put that Shah guy in. I don't know, but it's an elitism, and that's why they say we don't have to recognize these people's right to life, right to self-defense, rationality, responsibility, that they know the difference between right and wrong, that they have reason and, can act rationally. So, once you deny that certain people are human, you don't have to respect their rights. And so I think there's an elitism at the bottom of it all that I think a lot of, like the Judeo-Christian continuum will get a lot of Americans who aren't Jewish to think in those terms.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's it's scary. I actually just I was talking to Jessica Rose over the weekend, and she didn't get into details, but she's like, it's scary because she's in Israel. She's like, she's hearing bombs from like really nearby, and we forget that there's people involved in this, and there's people
who voted Netanyahu out 3 times, by the way.
Yeah, and did you hear about this story about the BB files, right? The documentary?
No, but I know he was on trial for corruption. I guess that's on hold.
So the BB files, right before this all went down, what was it, a week ago, when like really this started ramping up, the documentary was available on like Google Play. It was available on Amazon. You could rent it. You could watch it, rent it on YouTube. Now the documentary is unavailable everywhere, and people are using VPNs and to try to change their location, and so they thought maybe it's just unavailable in the U.S. No, it's unavailable everywhere. No matter what country you're in, they're not letting you have access to it. It's a documentary that goes into his corruption cases and all this stuff. It goes into his wife. His wife seems just as bad as he is, and it's pretty wild. But you can, luckily, thanks to people who still believe in open source. I don't know how some people have gotten their hands on it, and they're uploading it on YouTube. So you can actually find it, like copies of it on YouTube. If you just look up the BB Files documentary, I'm sure it's probably on Odyssey, BitChute, Rumble, like some of the other alternative platforms also. So thank God for people who realize that, like, hey, there's a reason why this stuff should be open source, because now you hide it from the rest of the world. And but it happened, like, they literally banned it right before all this stuff started ramping up. And of course, BB's going to be on TV a lot. He's going to do speeches a lot. He's going to be promoting everything that's going on. So kind of hiding that documentary or suppressing it would be, it'd be great timing. I know that James Corbett, it's been a while since I watched it, but he did a good one called Meet, because he always does these like Meet Elon Musk, Meet BB Netanyahu, or however you say his name. And he did a pretty good deep dive into his background and whatnot. But it's amazing how this guy, I mean, people talk about Trump being a dictator. Like, this guy is like a next level. And Also, what's your concern about the alliance that this is potentially, and already has, but now potentially even strengthening more between Russia, Iran, and China?
I've had a theory about what's going on with that all for a while. Maybe things are changing. I don't know. You see some ways in which they all cooperate. China, COVID and everything, everybody kind of paid lip service to that it was real. I believe the Chinese vaccine is not an mRNA vaccine, though. So they did not sacrifice their people and their future for it. Uh, I don't know about the Russian one, but you see stuff like that, and you're like, at one level, everybody's kind of cooperating. I always wondered why Putin didn't say ISIS is us, like is the US. Like, why wouldn't he say that? Why doesn't he out Edward Snowden, who's not in Russia? Like, I just don't understand it. But I think at a certain level, they like to keep the levers of power in place. They're not really going to destroy the system because they have a seat at the table. And I've been thinking for a while that what they really want to do, the world powers have kind of agreed or working towards bringing back the Iron Curtain, bringing back the bipolar world. Like people talk about the multipolar world order, but I think it's more like let's just divide the world in two. The one thing I think is really in dispute are those super high-end chips, like the AI type chips. The US really doesn't want China to have those. It seems like that seems legit. But other than that, I think that they're kind of prepared to divide the world in two. And and you know, India is one of those things that's just in play. Like I don't think they respected the sanctions or whatever. And that's one reason why I expected to have some Indian person in the White House, whether the top job or the second job, and they were all running, like it was going to be Kamala or Vance. So they think they're still trying to see which way that's going to fall out. And I just don't think the Western powers want to give up the Middle East, but maybe maybe they're fine with it. Maybe China and Russia are fine with converting the Middle East into an EU type zone. And if the US or Israel has to be the one that pounds Iran into submission, maybe the time has passed. Like it's possible that these things happen at such a high level. The time has passed. They don't need Iran to be a religious thing anymore. They can bring it back to the Shah. It has I think it has something like 10% of the world's oil. Like they are going to want to bring that back into the fold. And it was more prosperous under the Shah. People lived better. Yes, there was torture, but there was also, women didn't have to cover their faces and stuff. They may have the population on their side, but where would that dividing line go? Maybe some regions like Africa, maybe China gets Africa and, Europe gets the Middle East. It's already mixed and matched already anyway. But yeah, I think they divvy it up at the highest levels. And I think Russia lost a lot of standing when he lost Syria. He's not willing to give up Ukraine, but I mean, he'll probably just divide down the middle, not down the middle, but the Russian side will go to him. And they've been talking about that since the very beginning. So it's possible these things are, known pretty far in advance.
Well, you remember the Sykes-Picot Agreement after World War I at the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Is that what you're kind of referring to? Like world powers having...
Yeah, I think two things happened. Yeah. I think the Sykes-Picot Agreement, what they did was they tried to make all the countries patchworks. They didn't care about the tribes, the religion, the ethnicities, and they made them very artificial. And that was intended to weaken them, I think, over time. And then I noticed, and I've done shows on this a couple of decades ago, or you could go back to the 60s and look at somebody like Nasser, who was a secular leader in Egypt. But you look at all the leaders that they've taken out, they're secular. Hussein was secular. Assad was secular. Gaddafi was secular. We talk about fighting radical Islam, but really what they didn't like was when somebody like Assad could take a country with such disparate ethnicities that was drawn in a weird way and unify it. See, he was the Alawite, so he was in a minority sect, and it was fine. Like I'm not saying it was perfect, but it wasn't like ridden with sectarian strife the way they kind of say. And I think once over time that these sectarian guys or non-religious guys, secular guys started to make those countries coherent, they had to revert to the tribal thing. And I think that's why they're like Condoleezza Rice had the new Middle East map, which had like Kurdistan and Shia territory. So like really made it like that. And then from what I read, I did a lot of work on the Boston Marathon bombing. And at that time, I uncovered a lot of stuff. Our guys go over there, like the Tsarnaev brothers were over there. They were the older brother worked for the CIA. The younger brother was going to be a dentist, but he was over there. What the article, I remember the quote that he was bribing venal imams. Venal, I had to look up what venal meant, like people who will take money, venal. So that's why Russia blew the whistle on Tsarnaev as a terrorist. He wasn't a terrorist of radical Islam. He was a U.S. terrorist against them. Like he was terrorizing, he was paying for terrorism in Chechnya and stuff. So they go in there and they bribe these guys. They deindustrialize, call it like a Arab thing, Muslim thing. I think it was a phase two. I think like Samuel Huntington and Bernard Lewis, those guys had a plan to kind of, change once again the situation over there. And I always think of it as the 21st century dialectic. The 20th century was whatever, like communism and capitalism, and you got a synthesis of social democracy. Now I think it's secular humanism or the West with this like highly authoritarian theory, Sharia law or whatever, where you have people who are willing to have the government take over moral things. And I think that's what we're seeing here with the Christian nationalism, Catholic integralism, the Trump personality thing, the fact that it gets all religious. So I feel like they're after, big T, they're after a 21st century dialectic that the synthesis includes these moral laws, wear a mask or whatever, and they're just going to synthesize that Middle Eastern authoritarian feeling. They like that about Catholics too. I mean, these things are pushing refugees into and Muslim immigration into Europe, and I think for that reason to kind of transform it from a really liberal, and I mean that in a classical sense, to a more, giving up some of those civil liberties because you can't afford them, and people will say, okay.
It's weird because the West has been pushing the opposite for a while, and obviously a lot of the anti-Christian value type things have been pushed for a while in culture, in media, in TV, and obviously the algorithms that on YouTube and whatnot. And it seemed like, and I don't know how much you know about Alexander Dugin and some of his work, but I had Michael Millerman on, professor from Canada, that he got fired because he was translating. He was the first person to translate Alexander Dugin into English. Obviously it started a backlash at the university and whatnot. But some of Alexander Dugin's perspectives on this idea of they want countries to be less of these traditional values and more of these new liberal values. And do you think there's anything to that? Or because it seems like what you're saying is almost a little bit of the opposite, right? Like that.
Yeah, I'm not saying, I hear what you're saying. I don't think they're going to institute conservative values. I think they're going to synthesize it by gutting the morality and just allowing for countries with, European countries or the US or whatever, to incorporate more authoritarian rules, to take away the civil liberties, a la an authoritarian religious kind of state. So like you don't have civil liberties in Catholicism. They don't come to your house and arrest you. They tell you you're going to go to hell, but you don't get to decide. You don't get to vote on what the rules are. the rules are the rules, take it or leave it. Similarly with Islam, I mean, you don't get to vote what the rules are. They will allow, if I understand Sharia law correctly, they will allow for their political entity, like in Iran supposedly, to control the actual laws. And this is this idea of Catholic integralism in the US by Adrian Vermeule, who was the guy who co-authored conspiracy theories with Cass Sunstein, where they invented cognitive infiltration. So obviously there's some plot people to give up on civil liberties, whether it's on the left or the right. And you see people on the left and the right totally willing to give up on civil liberties, from the immigration riots or protests or whatever you want to call them in LA to the vax mandates. So you have the left and the right totally willing to relinquish civil liberties for cultural reasons. And that's what I'm afraid of, because it's just a ploy. There is no ideology at work. Adrian Vermeule is not a champion of Catholicism. He's the guy who invented cognitive infiltration. So there's no ideology there. There is just a maximal control thing going on. And it could be just like corporatism. It could be just, like international financial capitalism or something at work there. And that's why I don't really believe any of our leaders are allies of the citizens of their own countries. That's why I always wonder who's on top. Is it the US, the UK, Israel? I really don't know. But wherever that continuum is up there, they're the ones calling the shots. And that's why you can see, because the immigration thing is designed to keep us from actually having a culture or having an actual content that could inform that authoritarian thing. It's like Common Core. They tell you how to teach, but they gut all the content from it, and it's just empty process. But there's a lot of authority at the top, and nobody knows how to think at the end of it. But yeah, I don't think they're going to make it. I don't think we're going to get a swing to conservative values. I think we're going to get a swing to authoritarianism.
Yeah, that is a problem with people in regards to not being okay with certain things when it hurts your side, and then being okay with it when it hurts the other side. When the military is coming in California, like, people should be a little concerned, because like you said, it wouldn't be hard to do the same thing when there's anti-war protesters or whatnot. And I mean, if the riots and the protests get violent enough, I mean, I guess, and nobody's doing anything about it, I mean, when is it okay to maybe, I guess, pull out that card and use that card and do it? Where that line's drawn is interesting and probably different for everybody. But you're right, there is very little consistency with their own logic and their own morals and what's right and what's wrong and whatnot. I mean, when we talk about like who's at the top, I'm much like you. I'm always wrestling with this conversation. It's like, okay, is it John Perkins, philosophy on the world that and like that movie, The Network? There is no country, there's only DuPont and this and that. Is it all just a big business and everything is just a asset and just basically a resource that people are trying to gather? Or is it darker, right? And, is it occultism? Is it, really influenced by eugenics and the elite still believing that they are of royal blood and that they are the ones who should be ruling over others? And, like we in America, we joke about the kings and queens of England and how silly it is that they still have a royal family, but we treat a lot of the elite families here like they're better than us also, and we have that same thing. So I'm like, it's that quote from the Bible, the greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing you he doesn't exist. I'm like, that's literally what the elite did. In America, we've been now convinced that that they don't exist and that the power is in our hands.
Yeah.
And but I'm like, it's the same thing. It's like you have the Soros, you have the Koch brothers, you have these are the people who are using their influence and networking and resources and money and wealth and friends to get what they want and control things, and they can sway culture and society and laws and countries in any direction that they want. So, and then, when you start looking at it from that perspective, it's like, okay, maybe it's deeper than just money, because it gets to a point where, like we've all talked about, like you can only have so many cars and so many things until things don't really excite you anymore, and you lose a desire for those things. And then it's like, well, what's the next fix? You become that drug addict where it's like, okay, now I need something bigger. Well, I can influence culture. I can influence
control humanity.
Control humanity. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I remember my father used to say whenever he saw somebody put their name up on a wing of a hospital or he would say, they don't believe in God. Like, what are you talking about? It's like they want their reward here on earth, and they want immortality here on earth. And it shows that with a lot of money, that is what you're looking for, is some larger control. But then, that's when you start getting into really dark conspiracy theories, because when you see something like 9/11, you're like, well, how could anyone think it's okay to kill a bunch of people like that? Anyone, no matter who it was. But somebody did it. Somebody did it. Either a bunch of Saudis, which is what they were supposedly were for some reason, still our allies, not a bunch of Iraqis, a bunch of Saudis, dancing Israelis, Dick Cheney, like whoever did it, somebody did it. And somebody thinks that it was okay to do. So you got to figure that's not somebody who believes in any kind of God that, is a major religion. So is it a satanic thing? Is it an elitist thing where they just don't think that people are human beings? Is it like they considering everyone being drafted in a war, which I realize like that's totally immoral, because those people in those Twin Towers were drafted into a war. And you start to think that, I mean, it feels so sinister that I cannot think of any human being who I could relate to making a decision like that. But they did. Somebody did it. And it makes you wonder if it could really be about money or something bigger.
Is there also a concern about, because it seems like both extremes are going to be inflated. Like you're going to have the pro-Israel people are going to be super pro-Israel, and then that's going to be justified by the super anti-Israel people. And obviously, I know Jewish people in America, and we all do. I mean, we all, I'm sure, know or have a Jewish friend or whatever. And do you think it's purposely done that they don't do a good job separating the conversation about Israel and Zionism and because I feel like there's so many people who just don't even understand that there's a difference between, a Zionist and a Jewish person who,
your dentist.
Yeah, your dentist, your lawyer, the guy who grew up in New York, has never been to Israel in his life, and just
doesn't believe in God. Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe practices.
I think they did that on purpose. I think the powers that be really anticipated what was happening. Because I remember when it was all of a sudden, I have a unique perspective because I know the dates that I was on the radio. So and I used to get callers. So I remember when you were allowed to say what. And I used to back then get a lot of emails pressuring me to say anti-Semitic stuff that was wrong. I was looking into it. I was like, that is a false quote, like absolutely a false quote. And I would see where it would originate. And I'm thinking, but I read the Oded Yinon plan. Like that was real. Like I knew Israel had Zionists. Like I knew it. And I'm like, why is this something that's being pushed on me? And I've seen it emerge over the past 10 years where people very openly, and the whole race thing too, like will openly talk about racial issues completely beyond what should have been the parameters of it being able to discuss these things. So you went into, I remember back in the day when they stopped allowing news or really frowned on or whatever, completely stopped that in a news article would ever say the race of a criminal suspect. They would not say it anymore. They just stopped. So they were really trying to sanitize racial conversation. And yes, that was that. it's deceptive. It's hyper reality. But then it got to be the other side where literally there's a group that's like, if you haven't been out, pounding the table, speaking out against Israel and all the stuff, like the whole entire time, you're a traitor or whatever. I'm like, how is that if you're not talking about this right now? So there's a lot of pressure to do that. And I feel like it was all a lead up to this war that they want to have that anti-Semitism legislation, and it has to be justified and it has to feel like it's violent. So in order to do what they always do during a war, which is put people in jail for objecting to it. And I fear that we might have a false flag coming up here that has a religious element to it, either Jewish or Protestant, evangelical or whatever. And the purpose would be to make it feel like there is a continuum between the United States and Israel and the Protestants here, because it's mostly Protestant country, to make it feel defensive, like it's self-defense, because any moral person who believes in the 10 Commandments has to say you can't steal or kill. And that's, war is those two things unless it's purely defensive. And to make it, and of course, to suppress freedom of speech, to have censorship and surveillance and all of that, which is what they want anyway. It could be that's the real goal of all of it, that they could accomplish this in a different way, and they don't want to. Like the LA riots thing. Obama deported many more people than Trump, like month by month, and he did it quietly. So there was no reason for this. There's no reason for you to take out the grocery workers. You know what I mean? And then tell me that we need people who got free education in India competing for like the wages of Silicon Valley workers. Like that's just not sound. So these things are provocations, and I think that they meant to create problems, and really the surveillance and censorship state continue to be the number one goal, because once that's done, it's over.
It still boggles my mind though that there's so many conflicting, like I guess the influence of like just the Israel government. I can't grasp how, no matter if it's a Republican, Democrat, everybody's pro-Israel, and anybody who isn't, and obviously there's been some in the news recently, are just getting bashed, and they're a small minority. And I mean, did you watch that Ted Cruz, Tucker Carlson little? It's a good little video, because Tucker had him on. Basically, I don't know if it was supposed to be a debate, but it ended up being a debate. And Piers Morgan, I give him a lot of credit too. He hosts. I said this right when he first started hosting debates. I'm like, we need more of this. I know people are like, oh, he's just trying to get clicks, but I'm like, people need to hear both sides argue. I mean, because I want to hear people kind of state their case, and either for the purpose of getting exposed for the lack of thought you put into your opinions, and also for being like called out. I think there's a need for that. This idea of like, I have this perspective and I hang out with only people on my team who have the same perspective, and we never try to meet somewhere where, sometimes you need to iron things out by arguing, So I think we do need more of that. The fact that we're always pro-Israel, regardless who's in power. This goes back to the blackmail thing. Like, I get a feeling that Assad is so advanced. When you look at like the CIA, MK Ultra, COINTELPRO, all these operations and all the social engineering operations, if Mossad is the equivalent of that, if not more advanced, and like you said, maybe even entertain the idea that they are the CIA or controlling the CIA, it wouldn't be hard to believe that this isn't a Anglo-American, that maybe this is a Israel thing.
Zog.
Yeah, maybe it is like the Zionist, it's the Zionist worldview is really that powerful, and they have that much. Because the thing about a Jewish, and this is not saying anything bad about Jewish people, we understand banks run the world, right? Like every conspiracy theorist, they learn that at a pretty young age. And who runs the banks?
Yeah.
It's like in many cases, it's the same people. That gives you a lot of influence. And I also see it from the perspective of like, they've never been a very violent or strong population of people that are going to take over countries or influence the world with their force. They've always done it with their
except for, some of these Israeli stuff.
Yes, exactly. But but historically, it's like because I hear stories even from like Western Europeans that would talk about like even in Portugal or even in Spain or even in France, like the banks were run by Jewish people. The organically, if you have all this influence and money makes the world go round, you're going to be able to control just about everything at some point if the banks are the ones funding everything at some point.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it looks like the financial thing is ruling. The alternate theory is that that's a service industry, and that the real money is, I mean, what would real money be? Real money would be commodities, gold mines, land. So if you're the banker of the black nobility, I guess is the counter theory, which I think drags in the Vatican and stuff. So maybe I should know more about that. But yeah, so that's the theory. And in this book, Lawrence in Arabia, which was a bestseller, it's really quite a good book with excellent footnotes. In it, it says that, and once I mention this to people, absolutely, many people know this already, that back in the day, 100 years ago, a lot of European Jews thought this idea of Israel was like an anti-Semitic plot because they had spent hundreds of years trying to be accepted into the communities and not run out like they had been in other places. And a lot of them who had made their mark, they didn't want to be perceived as having that dual loyalty. It was like the worst thing that could happen to them. So it's possible that it's a front. It's possible. I don't know. I mean, it may be a front, but it doesn't mean that the banks have their own interests, that there are loyalties among like-minded people. I mean, Mormons or Catholics or Jews or, skull and bonesmen. Like people have that in-group, out-group thing. And I feel like that you're going to serve your interests when you have them. Why they're all controlled by it here? I mean, again, it's a mechanism of control, like is to control somebody has to control, we're controlled. So somebody has to control the politicians. Somebody does that. There has to be a mechanism. There has to be a way to get your memos out. And maybe that's it. So you just have to trace it back. Is it religious Jews in Israel who are running the world because they're the ones who are running Netanyahu, who's running that? Or is it bigger than that? Is it the black nobility? Is it, people who own vineyards, ancient vineyards? Like, I have absolutely no idea. A lot of people think it's the Vatican. I don't think so, but maybe they're all in on it together. I don't know. But that's why I tell people, you don't have to believe in the conspiracy. You don't have to know about conspiracies, nothing. If you are absolutely a stalwart defender of basic moral principles like don't steal and don't kill, if you're honest with yourself about what that means, if you absolutely will not brook any violation of the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. I mean, Trump had absolutely no authority to bomb Iran. None. So, I mean, that's totally unconstitutional. And that should be grounds for impeachment because of the peril he puts us in. Not denying Ukraine foreign aid. He was impeached for that. Like that is ridiculous. And so it doesn't matter who's running things. We have foundational documented principles and rules, and we should defend them. Whether it's moral, your religion, or it's the government, with our Bill of Rights, we're lucky enough to have it, we should defend it.
Yeah, and the thing with Bibi is that he doesn't seem like he's also the strictest of religious people, and that's something you see over and over again where and this is where the anti-religious people, their argument is it's just a tool for control. And you see these people at the top, right? Obviously you brought up the Vatican, what was it, Pope John Paul I, 24 hours after becoming the Pope, died. Yeah. He was going to expose...
I think it was 30 days, but
or 30, something like that. And it was like he was going to expose the fact they were doing a bunch of money laundering and all these
Yep.
corruption, and there were links to the mob, because if you're going to hide money, what better place than the Vatican's bank, where,
Yeah.
you can't expose any corruption there. We brought up 9/11. They kept painting the picture that these were extremists, and then come to find out they're doing cocaine and hanging out with strippers before the terrorist attack. Like, are they true believers, or are
Yeah,
they
right.
just using, or somebody using these religious, go ahead.
Yes. I mean, that's what's terrible about it, is that religion is exploited like anything else that has power, like podcasts and, charities. Like they're exploited, they're infiltrated, whether people know what they're doing or not. It's terrible. But I just look at, all I know is my own religion, and I look at the tenets of it, and I look at I say the rosary. I have this great rosary where, like, I have this guide where it gives you a meditation for every single bead. And there's nothing wrong in any of it. There's nothing wrong in corporal works of mercy. There's nothing wrong in the Ten Commandments. There's nothing wrong in it. It's good. And if we all did those things, we wouldn't have wars anymore. If we all stood by that. If you think of the figurehead, Pope Leo or Trump or whoever's running these institutions, whoever appear to be running the institutions, as a proxy for the fundamental tenets of the religion or the country or whatever, that we would trump those. See, that's dangerous ground. We're talking about something that's been around for 2,000 years. It's been fully vetted. Any questions you have about the morality in canon law, you could probably find Thomas Aquinas or St. Augustine or somebody to lay it out for you. It's in black and white, and you can hold people to that standard. The reason these things get exploited and hijacked is because they're not being held to those standards, because the people who would hold them to the standards are corrupt also. The Democrats aren't calling it out for real. They're not going to really say what's going on. Newsom's favorite thing was when Trump fucking sent the Marines to LA. Like, he was just like, great, now I don't have to worry about the fires anymore. I mean, it's great. He's probably going to, be nominated for the DNC next time. I want to tell people the name of this book. I don't think I said it, and since people will be listening, Lawrence in Arabia by Scott Anderson. Just a very, mainstream book, but it had fantastic footnotes. It was a pretty good story.
Yeah, that book, I've heard it referenced quite a bit.
Oh, you have? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I just found it once, and
I didn't
just
even know
at
what
the
it was
bookstore
about.
when there were
I've heard people
bookstores.
talk about it. Just the title has definitely been brought up on shows I listen to and whatnot. There is a part of me too that also sympathizes with the people of Israel, because, and it's funny how, like, my opinion can change. Sometimes I feel like Trump, just mild version of him. Like, the last thing I watch is gonna mold my opinion right now.
Yeah.
I remember watching a documentary about the origin story of Hollywood, right? And then, why the Jewish people, run Hollywood. And then there's like multiple versions of the story. And some of it seems you should be sympathetic to them, because they really were kind of like treated like the other. And the reason why
the banking stories like that too.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's like, okay, how much of this is organic, where, like, if you grew up hearing these stories, knowing your history, knowing how your people have been treated, maybe you have no other choice but to be tribalistic, look after one another, and take these extreme measures, because history says that things don't turn out well if you don't.
Well, that's why Christianity has a disadvantage, because I feel like Christ's message was to rise above tribalism, to, like, the Good Samaritan. Somebody pointed out to me, the Samaritans were also Jews. They were like different tribes of Israel, because it's not one tribe either. So there were in-group, out-group things even within Judaism or, the Old Testament, but that it's very, and I remember watching some, whatever documentary or something or drama about England, saying England almost lost England because it had been Christianized before, the last wave of Vikings, and they just lost their brutality, and they just couldn't stand up to that. And it may be true, but it did also conquer the world, and maybe the Inquisition or the Roman Empire or whatever abused Christianity, and that's why it took over the world. But there's people like Tolstoy, a spiritualist anarchist, is like Christianity would not even allow for countries. So uh, I don't mind, I don't begrudge anyone the right to tribalism. I just would never tolerate a double ethic. So if your moral guideline is the Ten Commandments, which is great, it's absolutely great, and you stick to them, if it's your private property and you want to make transactions with only the people in your group, there's nothing wrong with that. As long as everything's above board, you don't buy off politicians. I don't know what the stories are about Hollywood. I really never read into it or whatever, but like with unions are fine, except for that they bribe politicians. They, or have in the past, they'll use violence against, the organizations that are defending themselves. And they exploit their own people, taking a lot of money and don't stand by them. I'm not saying all unions all the time, but I'm saying the idea of a union isn't bad. The idea of having a group that defends itself isn't bad, but you absolutely have to be held to the same moral standards that everybody else, the same legal standards as everybody else. And it would be nice if you stood up to your own moral standards. And I think a lot of people, every group has plenty of people that fall short on that score.
Yeah, and I think we are naturally tribalistic, and we migrate to people that have similarities to ourselves, and if we have something in common, if it's music, if it's what part of the country you grew up in, if it's whatever it may be, you kind of migrate to those people. So I think it does happen organically. I think it's unavoidable. And I think when you grow up in a tight-knit culture, that you do look at other cultures like the others, sometimes, like my parents are farmers from Portugal. Every time my mother sees somebody Asian, she doesn't know any better. She'll just say, "Oh, they're Chinese," and I'm like, "Oh, that's a Chinese person." I'm like,
Well, the reason, in my opinion, the reason you want to have, like, in my church, it's totally multicultural. The Catholic church I go to, I've never detected any prejudice within the church at all. Never. I never see anybody at the bake sale, mixed race, family stuff. Like, nobody holds anything against, because we're all working, because I always go to a conservative church or whatever. So we all really are on the same page. I would never go to like a liberal Catholic church. I mean, really, gosh, please spare me. But there's good, regular, old timey ones. And so you want to associate with those people because you're working towards the same values and goals, and they will influence your kids in the same way. When, out here, if some kid aspires to be, pro-abortion activist to the point where there's no, like, the dividing line is birth, which is basically now what the Constitution of California says. If that's, a friend of my daughter's and she needs a place to stay for the summer so she can do her internship, I'm not giving her that place to stay. I don't want her to do that internship. So this isn't a real example, but I'm just saying the reason you want to stick with people, specifically if your culture, which most thriving cultures have consistent morals. Like I think MacArthur said, he's never been to a country. If a country had two different religions, he knew it was on the backslide. I think Oswald Spengler said if it had different architecture, if it had eclectic architecture, it was on the backslide. That you can't, like, math and religion are two things that if they can oppose each other and negate each other. And then even if your country is still making money or whatever, it's not a civilization that's thriving. And that's, if you do have the same values, sometimes it's ethnic, sometimes it's religious, but I think usually it's both. And you believe in them, you want them for your kids, you can't support the other ones. That's why it's so important for us to have absolutely minimal government, federal government, absolutely minimal federal government, so that people in their pockets can live the way they want to. Even if they want to control their local governments, it's none of our affair. When you have something like gay marriage in the Constitution, that means that every adoption agency in the country has to allow for same-sex couples, then Catholic adoption agencies have to get into this national fight. They have to try to control everybody, and they can't have their own culture because it's in contradiction If you can't have a hospital that doesn't perform abortions, you've got to get into that fight to change that law. And I think that's why you want to, I think the tribalism's good.
But the U.S. has kind of done a great job of divide and conquer throughout its, recent history, and still seems to be a world power. I mean, can't that also be a method of control, keeping people kind of focused on hating their neighbor instead of those who are actually screwing up their lives?
Absolutely. I mean, I think alienating Mexicans is probably pretty stupid if you're Christian. Like the reason that Christianity continues to thrive in this country, it seems to me, is the immigration that Trump's trying to stop. I'm not pro open borders. I think there should be laws and they should be followed. I don't even understand the argument that you shouldn't follow the laws. Are they saying that you should have open borders, or are they just saying you should have laws that aren't enforced? Like, what are you saying?
Yeah,
Like,
I don't
first of
get
all,
that either. People will just use that term, and I'm like, what does that even mean? Open? You mean like literally like anybody can just
7 billion people, that's what you want? How's that going to go?
Yeah.
It would be fine if we had strict private property rights. And if anybody came up to your land, you could shoot them dead, but you can't. You got to keep it open for like the postman and stuff. You have to. And you can't discriminate. If you wanted to have a little organization where it's just like, you know what? We don't know who the fuck's coming over from Venezuela. No Venezuelans. You wouldn't. The government would come and make you open your doors, So you can't even protect yourself. So you have to dismantle minimum wage, welfare state. You'd have to restore private property rights. You'd have to weirdly get rid of some parts of the civil rights legislation that affected how private people can handle their property. Because then again, you're saying I've got to get into this bigger fight with a bunch of other people, and it's I mean it's intentional to make us fight with each other when. Meanwhile, the welfare warfare superstate just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you'll never get a smaller government now, because once the Republicans go to war, the way they horse trade for that budget is by capitulating, I think, on the ratio of like 3-1 in the Iraq war with Bush, to the Democrats to have their welfare and Medicare and Medicaid and stuff like that. Like expand. Like what Elon Musk was doing can't possibly be a drop in the bucket, because almost all of the federal budget outside of defense is just wealth transfer.
Yeah. And even the COVID vaccine and that whole scare, I think, was potentially, you could look at it as a way of getting rid of all these people who are kind of mooching off the system. And you could kind of, save some money because they're not making you any, right? And you can get rid of them. That's a fascinating way of looking at it. We're in like some crazy, crazy times. And it's hard to kind of unravel everything and figure out like who's pulling the strings, who is this helping, who is it not helping, what's the end game. It's fun to zoom out and try to figure things out, but like do you feel like this is going to be one of those things where like, okay, it escalates for a little bit, but eventually everybody's cooler heads are going to come to the table and be like, hey, we can't let this get out of hand and whatnot? Or do you see this continuously escalating and it's going to be a slow drip into eventually the end goal is to get a new regime in power? And that's the other thing that's weird, is that Trump's openly saying it, which is why
I know,
which
yes.
is the part of it that makes me feel like he knows his base was against that. Like why would he openly say, especially somebody who tries so hard to play to his base and and this is where the conspiratorial part of me says somebody has him by the balls. And somebody,
or he's going to say later, I was just saying that to get them to the table, blah, blah, blah. There's also the old Baudrillard thing, like nothing ever happens. Like maybe it's not really happening. Certainly if they're totally containing the strikes too, it's really uncool that they hit the nuclear. Iran's nuclear program is energy. That's what they use, nuclear energy. And there's not, I mean, they can say whatever they want about their goal, but I believe Iran has not stated that it wants to build nuclear weapons. Like the thing that they blew up today, as far as it was controlled by the Obama deal. The story is that was for medical purposes. I don't know if that's true or not. It seems a little, much, but if they are just bombing that kind of stuff and they're not really involving civilian centers, then yeah, maybe they're just going to go in for a deal. But why? Yeah, it reminds me of, was it Rumsfeld who said shock and awe? Like the Iraq thing was like all shock and awe, and it really wasn't that much. It's like a misdirection. And I don't know, but I mean, I can't help but expect some kind of false flag here to control the narrative, to escalate it.
Well, they've been saying Iran is 2 minutes away or 2 months away or 2 weeks away from making a nuclear bomb forever. And it's like, you can go back in history and see them say this over and over. And wasn't there that famous video of Bibi with like, he drew a bomb or something like that?
The cartoon bomb, like straight out of Tom and Jerry.
Straight out of Tom and Jerry, it absolutely was. Yeah, and so it's like, you obviously there, and really, if you're, and the thing is, the truth is, if you're Iran, it's in your best interest to kind of have it, because look at the countries that don't, right? That don't have the capability.
Of course, they have the right to defend themselves. Of course they do. And you won't hassle them if they have it.
Exactly.
Wasn't it Tesla who said, I wish I could build a weapon that everybody could have and could basically destroy the world, because then nobody would ever have war again? Yes, they have every right to defend themselves. And so do the Palestinians and the Syrians and the Israelis. Everybody has a right to defend themselves. But making shit up to make it look like it's self-defense when it isn't, I mean, that happens. And I fear that for us.
Well, because then everywhere would be like those very, gun-friendly states where everybody has a gun and there's no crime. It's like the whole world would be Texas, right? Where everybody's like...
Vermont. And you know what they're doing? They're ramping up immigration into Vermont. I keep saying, like, it's the lowest murder rate and the loosest gun laws in Vermont. And boy, I expect that to change. I hate to say stuff like that out loud because I don't want to speak it into existence.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Monica, for your time. This was a super fun discussion, and I love getting your always very interesting and different perspective on things. Anything coming up that you want to let people know about, where they can keep up with your work and anything else?
Yeah, I've started to. I love this thing. I read books and comment and like do it live so people can chit chat. And I'm doing the report from Iron Mountain, which is so interesting. Was it a hoax? Was it not a hoax? Does it matter? But it brings in all sorts of other sources, like L. Fletcher Prouty, and this JFK book talks about the report from Iron Mountain like 10 different times. And so I'm super excited about that. I do that every Tuesday at 2 or 3 in the afternoon Pacific, and then it's on the regular. I got my interviews, and then I'm basically rebuilding a little part of my house and dealing with like this firescape. Like I live on the moon now because my house is in this fire. So I'm kind of on a break of doing just strict news analysis. I think I'm going to bring that back at the end of the summer when the dust literally clears. So, but thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Monica, for your time. Hopefully I see you later tonight, and I'll send you links to the show once it's up and live.
Thanks, Ricky. Bye, everybody.
See ya.